The envelope arrived on a Thursday, no return address. Just my name, handwritten. Careful letters. Inside were photographs, 0.8 of them. I assumed they'd be of Marcus. Of her. Of whatever he'd been doing on those Tuesday nights when he came home 20 minutes later than usual and smelled like somewhere else. I was ready for that kind of pain. I was not ready for what was actually in the envelope. Every photograph was of me leaving the grocery store. Me in the school parking lot. Me sitting in my own kitchen, shot through the window from outside. The PI I had hired to watch my husband had been watching me instead. My name is Claire Ashworth. 38 years old. Elementary school teacher. Mother of one. I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened. I am not a paranoid person. I am not dramatic. I do not catastrophize. I do not invent problems. I am the woman who gives other people perspective. The one who says, I'm sure there's an explanation. I say that because what I'm about to describe, I need you to know it was real. Every piece of it. It started the way these things always start. Small. Dismissible. Marcus coming home, late on Tuesdays. A second phone I glimpsed once and never saw again. A name, Renata, that appeared once in his email when he'd left his laptop open and disappeared before I could read the rest. I didn't confront him. I'd been married 11 years. I knew Marcus. I knew how he closed down under pressure, how accusation made him retreat so completely that you could never get to the truth. So, I decided to get the truth another way. I Googled private investigators in our area. Found a firm called Halcyon Consulting Group. Professional website. Client testimonials. A phone number with a local area code. I called on a Wednesday afternoon while Marcus was at work and Lily was at school. A man answered. Calm voice. Measured. He introduced himself as Daniel Voss. He asked me what I needed. I told him I needed someone followed. He asked for a name. I gave him Marcus's full name, his workplace, his car, his schedule. Daniel Voss said he understood. Said it was more common than I thought. Said he'd have something for me within 2 weeks. He quoted me $1,800. I paid half up front by credit card. I felt something release in my chest after I hung up. Not happiness. Not relief exactly. Just the particular exhale of a woman who has finally stopped waiting and started moving. 2 weeks passed. Marcus continued his Tuesdays. I continued my performance of normal. Dinner. Homework with Lily. Television. Sleep. I got very good at the performance. On the 15th day, the envelope arrived. Thick. Manila. My name in careful handwriting. No return address. I waited until Lily was at school and Marcus was at work. Sat at the kitchen table. Opened it. 8 photographs. Glossy. Time-stamped. Professionally shot. I turned the first one over. It was me. Standing outside the grocery store on Elm. Reusable bags in both hands. Looking at my phone. I remembered that day, 2 Saturdays ago. I'd gone alone because Marcus had taken Lily to soccer. I turned the second one over. Me again. In the school parking lot. Waiting to pick up Lily. Driver's side window down. The third. Me walking Pepper. We had a dog, a retriever named Pepper, along the trail behind our neighborhood. Earbuds in. Unaware. The fourth stopped my breath entirely. I was sitting at my own kitchen table. The angle was from outside. Through the window above the sink. I was drinking coffee. Reading something. Completely unaware. Someone had been in my backyard. Looking in. Photographing me inside my own home. I put all 8 photographs face down on the table. Sat very still. And I thought about Daniel Voss's calm voice on the phone. More common than you think. I picked up my phone and called the number I had for Halcyon Consulting Group. It rang 4 times. Then a recording. This number is no longer in service. I Googled the firm. The website was gone. Not down. Not under maintenance. Gone. As if it had never existed. I sat at that table for a long time. The photographs face down in front of me. The silence of the house pressing in from every direction. And I understood, with the particular clarity of someone whose careful, reasonable world has just cracked open, that I had not hired a private investigator. I had handed a stranger my husband's name, my address, my schedule, my daughter's school, and $900 in cash. And that stranger had used every piece of it.
On me.
The question that came next was the one that changed everything. Not who is Daniel Voss,
But who sent him to me?
I did not call the police.
I want to be honest about that.
I thought about it. I sat with my hand on my phone for a long time.
But here is what stopped me.
If I called the police, Marcus would find out. And I still didn't know what Marcus's role was in any of this. Was he behind it? Was he being watched too? Was he a victim or the architect?
I didn't know.
And I had learned from the first marriage, the one before Marcus, the one I never talk about, that moving before you understand the full shape of something is how you end up more exposed than when you started.
So I made myself think.
I went back to the beginning. How had I found Halcyon Consulting Group? Google search. Wednesday afternoon. Private investigators near me. I'd clicked the third result. I opened my laptop and searched again. The listing was gone, but my browser history still had the original URL cached. I copied it into the Wayback Machine, an internet archive tool I'd used once for a school project years ago. The site had been created 11 days before I called, and taken down the day after the envelope arrived. 11 days. Someone had built an entire fake investigation firm 11 days before I went looking for one, which meant one of two things. Either it was a coincidence so enormous it defied all logic, or someone had known I would go looking. I closed the laptop, walked to the window above the sink, stood exactly where whoever had taken that photograph had stood. Our backyard was fenced. Tall panels. Private. The gate had a latch on the inside. I went outside, examined the gate. The latch had been lifted from the outside. There were marks in the wood, small, clean.
A tool.
Done carefully by someone who knew what they were doing and wasn't in a hurry. They had been in my yard. Not once. Based on the photographs, at least twice. Twice in my yard. Once outside the grocery store. Once at the school. Someone had built a timeline of my movements. A map of where I went and when. And now they had it. I went back inside. Made coffee I didn't drink. And I started writing down everything I knew about the name Renata. Renata. One name. One glimpse of an email subject line. I hadn't seen the sender's address. Hadn't seen the content. Just the name and the way Marcus had closed the laptop with a particular kind of casualness that wasn't casual at all. I searched Marcus's name alongside Renata in every combination I could think of. Nothing useful. Then I searched his workplace, Hargrove Engineering, alongside the name. Third result. A LinkedIn profile. Renata Solis. Senior Project Coordinator. Hargrove Engineering Group. Her profile was sparse. A headshot. Dark hair, early 40s, careful smile. 3 years at Hargrove. Connected to 41 people. I clicked through her connections. Marcus wasn't listed. But that meant nothing. Marcus kept his LinkedIn private. I screenshot her profile. Then I did something that felt invasive and necessary in equal measure. I created a fake LinkedIn account. Sent her a connection request as a fictitious recruiter. And then I waited. She accepted within the hour.
Which told me she was active.
Online. Paying attention. I sent a message, generic recruiter language, asking if she was open to new opportunities. She replied in 20 minutes. Polite. Professional. Said she was happy at her current role but open to conversation. We exchanged 2 more messages. Then I asked, carefully, casually, if she'd worked with anyone at Hargrove she'd particularly recommend. Her reply came back in 8 minutes. She named 4 people. Marcus was not one of them. I stared at that list. And then I noticed something. The 4th name she'd mentioned, a man named Tom Ashworth, shared my last name. Tom Ashworth. Marcus's last name was Ashworth. Tom Ashworth was Marcus's younger brother. Tom who lived in Portland. Tom who we saw at Christmas. Tom who was quiet and careful and never quite met my eyes. I sat back. Why was Marcus's brother connected to the woman in Marcus's email? Why was Marcus's brother connected to anything in this? I searched Tom Ashworth and Renata Solis together. Nothing public. But when I searched Tom Ashworth and Halcyon Consulting Group, one result. A business registry filing from 18 months ago. Halcyon Consulting Group LLC. Registered agent. Thomas P. Ashworth. The fake investigation firm. The firm that had photographed me in my own kitchen. Had been registered by my brother-in-law. I put the laptop down. Pressed both hands flat against the table. And I understood that this had been built inside my family. Not by a stranger. By someone who sat across from me at Christmas dinner and passed the bread rolls and asked how my students were doing. The question was no longer who. The question was why. And the answer to that, I was almost certain, was going to require me to look at Marcus differently than I ever had before. Not as a husband I suspected of an affair, but as a man I might not know at all. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Home by 7. Should I pick up dinner? I typed back. Sure. Surprise me. And then I did something I hadn't planned. I drove to Tom's apartment. 40 minutes. No call ahead. I needed to see his face when he opened the door. Because some things you can't learn from a screen. He answered on the second knock. And the moment he saw me, before a single word had been spoken, his face did something that told me everything. It didn't show guilt. It showed relief. Like a man who had been waiting a very long time for someone to finally come and find him. My lawyer's name was Patricia Okafor, 61 years old, 28 years in family and civil law. The kind of woman who listened to everything before she said anything, and when she spoke, she chose every word like she was placing it under oath. I had never been so grateful for anyone in my life. I sat in her office at 6:47 p.m. on a Saturday, and I told her everything, the envelope. The photographs.
Tom.
Renata Solis. The probate account. The $4.1 million. The filing on Monday. I talked for 40 minutes without stopping. She took notes the entire time. When I finished, she set her pen down, looked at me, and said, "He made one critical mistake." I waited. "He used a fraudulent business entity to surveil you. That's not just a civil matter, Claire. That's criminal." She leaned forward slightly. "Everything he was building to use against you, we flip it. The photographs become evidence of his conspiracy, not your instability. The fake firm becomes wire fraud. The coordination with Renata becomes conspiracy to commit financial exploitation." She sat back. "By the time he walks into any courtroom, he won't be the petitioner. He'll be the defendant." We worked until midnight. Emergency injunction to freeze the probate proceedings, a formal complaint filed with the State Bar against Renata Solis, documentation of the Halcyon Consulting Group fraud submitted to the District Attorney's Office, a protective order for Lily. Patricia did all of it with the focused efficiency of someone who had spent decades cleaning up messes that men had made while underestimating women. At one point she looked up from her keyboard and said, almost to herself, 36 hours. He gave you 36 hours and you used every minute. I drove home at 12:23 a.m. Marcus was asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a moment, watching him. He was on his side, facing away, breathing slow, and even 11 years of that breathing beside me, 11 years of believing it meant safety. I went to Lily's room instead, sat on the edge of her bed in the dark, watched her sleep the way only children sleep, completely, without reservation. Trusting the world entirely. I stayed there for a long time. Sunday I was careful. Normal breakfast. Normal conversation. Normal performance. Marcus was warm. Attentive. He made pancakes, Lily's favorite, and let her put too many blueberries in and didn't say anything about the mess. I watched him be a good father for one last ordinary morning, and I let myself feel the grief of that, because it was real. Even knowing everything, the grief was real. Monday morning Marcus left for work at his usual time. He kissed me on the cheek, said he'd be home by 7. I said, okay. He didn't make it to 7. At 11:14 a.m. Patricia filed the injunction. At 11:40 a.m. 2 detectives arrived at Hargrove Engineering. At 12:03 p.m. Marcus Allen Ashworth was escorted from his office. Renata Solis surrendered her law license by 3 p.m. Tom cooperated fully with investigators. The $4.1 million, my inheritance. Paul's final act of whatever complicated feeling he'd carried for me across a decade, was released from probate holding 6 weeks later. I didn't keep all of it. I kept enough to buy a smaller house in a quieter neighborhood,
To take a year away from teaching.
to sit with Lily in our new backyard and let things be slow for a while. The rest I put somewhere it could do something useful, because money that was meant to destroy you feels different when you decide what it builds instead. People ask me when I tell the story what the hardest part was. They expect me to say the photographs, or the moment I understood what Marcus had been planning, or sitting across from him at Sunday breakfast, knowing what Monday would bring. But the hardest part was simpler than any of that. The hardest part was the Tuesday nights, before I knew anything, when I'd lie awake listening to him sleep and tell myself, there's probably an explanation. I'm probably overreacting. This is probably nothing. The hardest part was all the time I spent making myself smaller, so the truth would have less room to land. I don't do that anymore. Lily is 9 now. She asks about her father sometimes. I tell her the truth in pieces, age-appropriate pieces, carefully chosen, because she deserves honesty more than she deserves comfort. She is fiercer than I was at her age, and I hope she stays that way. The photographs are in a box in my closet. I've thought about destroying them, but I haven't yet, because sometimes I take out the one of me sitting at my kitchen table, unaware, drinking coffee, completely exposed, and I look at her, that woman who didn't know yet, who was about to find out, and I think she handled it. She was steadier than she knew. Claire spent 11 years making herself believe there was probably an explanation. Probably nothing to worry about. Probably overreacting. We've all done it, shrunk ourselves down so the uncomfortable truth has less room to breathe. So I want to ask you something honest. Is there something in your life right now that you've been telling yourself is probably nothing? Because sometimes the most dangerous words we speak are the ones we say only to ourselves. Claire trusted her instincts just in time. But what happens when the person you should trust most is the one telling you your instincts are wrong? Next time, a woman whose therapist told her she was imagining things. She wasn't. And the reason her therapist needed her to believe she was is one of the darkest things I've ever uncovered.